Hi, everyone. My name is Kathleen Wren, Global Head of Digital Assets at Invesco. Great to be with you all. Welcome to our panel on interoperability or fragmentation, the tokenization challenge. So tokenization is redefining how financial markets operate. But will that lead to unified ecosystems or fragmented silos? Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to explore this through the lens of liquidity, infrastructure and standards, regulatory alignment, and collaborating with TradFi, across TradFi and DeFi to really uncover what is necessary for tokenization to scale. But before diving in, I'd love the panelists to introduce yourself and your role and your firm's approach to digital assets.
Hi, my name is Andy Shupek. I am the America's Head of Digital Asset Innovation at Northern Trust. And our approach to digital assets is really more around the tokenization of traditional types of products and the work that we do for asset servicing and asset management today.
Hi everyone, I'm Charles. Working with SocGen, leading digital assets initiatives in the US and structuring for SG Forge, which is our digital assets subsidiary. Our focus has been working on public chains, starting by issuing security bonds, tokenized bonds, 5-6 years ago. And then we moved to stablecoins with our own Euro and USD stablecoins on public chains. We launched Morpho Vaults not so long ago, and we're trying to develop more TradFi versus DeFi applications.
Everyone, I'm Will Peck. I'm head of digital assets at WisdomTree. WisdomTree is a global asset manager, ETF sponsor, manage about $140 billion worldwide, and increasingly kind of tokenized asset manager as well. I head up the team that has launched a series of tokenized funds. We manage approximately $700 million in tokenized assets, so kind of one of the larger providers today. So great to speak with you all.
Hey everybody, I'm Christine Moy, partner at Apollo, which is a $900 billion alternative asset manager. I lead digital assets, data, and AI strategy, and it's been my life's work for the past decade, working on real-world assets tokenization. Previous to Apollo, I built and led JP Morgan's blockchain program.
That's great. So we have a great panel to answer all these questions. So maybe let's start with bigger picture. Christine, we'll start with you. I guess, what's driving urgency around tokenization at Apollo?
Sure. I mean, like as I mentioned, have been working in the space for about 10 years, and it's always been urgent. But I would say that we're at an inflection point where now the technology is incredibly proven and battle tested, whereas like 10 years ago, it was like, we see the possibilities of smart contract, and then now fast forward, you see like, this technology can uphold like almost $4 trillion of value in various different forms and has been very resilient through various market cycles. So the technology, although not complete and will ever be evolving, is kind of at the stage where you can have confidence in using it for real value transfer of size. I would say, secondly, institutions and regulators are like kind of up to speed. Like everyone's basically spent the past 10 years learning about, studying, and working on tokenization. Whereas 10 years ago, people were like, oh my God, blockchain is coming now, like what's happening? And everyone, was rushing to figure out what it was and trying to figure out, like, prove how innovative they were, and, a lot of innovation theater and press releases. But I would say, like, by this point, everyone knows what it does, what it could be good at, what most people, what it could not be good at. And rather than having, press releases, we're actually seeing more discussion and focus on what are actual commercial use cases, right? And then the third part is, especially the regulatory environment in the US has significantly opened up. So I would say that with all of those, major thematic factors combined, like, feel that we are in an inflection point to be ready to do something real. And so for those that have not been following, Apollo has been focused on tokenizing our private credit funds. We're on a number of different permissionless blockchains. And we are also experimenting heavily in DeFi, most recently enabling Apollo Private Credit Fund to be eligible collateral in a DeFi borrow lend protocol, Morpho. And definitely falling down the DeFi rabbit hole, like incredible. Like, in 2021, was super excited about DeFi in the context of DeFi Summer, and always had imagined the bank mullet of, a bank front end with a DeFi back end. And so, pretty excited to see that we're kind of at the verge of actually seeing this come to reality in some ways.
Absolutely. I think it's so exciting. There's a panel earlier as well today talking about how we're moving from kind of marketing headlines to really kind of real value use cases like Christine's mentioning. I guess with that, Charles, how does SocGen define tokenization in your digital asset strategy?
Yeah, I think we've made great progress over the last few years. I remember when we started and when we issued the first tokenized bond on Ethereum and Tezos yeah, 6 years ago. The discussions that we have at the time with clients were a real nightmare to manage. Everything was done manually. It didn't fit any kind of traditional systems for clients. And so it was kind of difficult for us to have this pitch, this sales pitch to find the buy side, just because when you ask people to do everything differently than what they're used to do, it's usually a bit of a difficult situation. Now that we have, for example, stable coins and that we can deliver like the full on-chain promise of instant settlement, removing counterparty risk, these kinds of bring a lot more added value to the proposition and to the transactions that we do and we see in the market. And I totally agree that we started working on public chains since the beginning, and we are very happy to see like a lot of the traditional actors also going to the public chains these days. It's a real more mature ecosystem that is growing, and we are very happy to be part of it. One thing to note is that we've seen a lot of initiatives around tokenized market funds that were successfully launched in the US. We still need to see more kind of assets in the US, bonds. We would see equities that has been announced already, but all kind of different assets available on chain to really see the added value of these new technologies.
Absolutely. I think that brings it to also maybe Andy for you. Are you seeing more fragmentation or convergence across these tokenized platforms?
So I think we are seeing more fragmentation, but we have a desire to see more convergence, right? I think it's kind of an interesting dichotomy in that we all talk about the fact that we want to have as much interoperability and as much convergence around the products from a general TradFi, DeFi type of activity. There's definitely a convergence, and we see that not only in the product launches and the strategies and even the investor types, but most importantly with the regulators. In terms of technology, it's a little bit different because now we're seeing like a real proliferation of new layer ones, right? And so obviously, it's one of those things where as I think back about 20 years and electronic trading, we had these things called ECNs in the equity world, and they were great because now you could trade electronically, but they weren't great because now I could be 5-bit on Island and it'd be trading 4s at Archipelago, and you go, why am I not filled? So I think that the key is really, like we talk about, getting all of this convergence around regulatory, around technology, around products types and investor types, so that if we really want to move forward with this, we have to have capabilities that will allow for us to be across the whole spectrum of the one asset across everybody.
Yes, absolutely. I think definitely been a proliferation of L1s recently. And you almost wonder, like, now we're seeing meaningful interest and adoption from TradFi players. I guess, Will, do you think that fragmentation is kind of a necessary step before meaningful convergence?
Yeah, I thought this was a really interesting question. At some level, it's frustrating that there has been a lot of fragmentation. I mean, so ETF firm, when WisdomTree launched its first ETFs 20 years ago, it was not so obvious to the entire world, certainly, that ETFs were going to become the thing that they became, right? Where 20 years later, there's nearly $20 trillion. It's like $15 trillion worldwide in the structure. Totally eaten the lion's share of assets and flows from mutual funds over the past 2 decades, right? And one of the main reasons why we think that is that the standardization that ETFs provided, where all you needed was a US brokerage account and you could access an asset anywhere in the world, like a liquid asset anywhere in the world. It could be Japanese stocks, it could be European bonds, whatever. All you needed was a brokerage account. So you look at tokenized markets, you think, okay, well, now all I need is a smartphone with internet connection, right? And I can access and hold any asset anywhere in the world. You've seen that clearly with what stablecoins have done for kind of the overseas checking account, right? With providing access to dollars to people who just have a smartphone and internet connection. And so at some level, it's frustrating where it's like, well, we're not, it's easy to say that, but the reality of how this is being delivered is not true yet, where you've got different people who are kind of providing these on-ramps and they've got their own way of doing things, and that's different from somebody else who's got their own way of doing things. And the tokens don't necessarily interact as much as you'd like, especially if they need to be permissioned, right? So it is frustrating, but maybe it's just reality, right? We're not some kumbaya sort of situation, we're businesses that are competing, trying to develop our own sets of standards, right? Attract other people to those standards. And people who provide the best customer experience, gain assets, gain traction. I think other people kind of gravitate towards those standards a bit more. And I don't know, maybe there's kind of a self-reinforcing thing there. So maybe it is inevitable that there's going to be some fragmentation, but I think it's certainly going to need to converge on some sets of standards. Like the market's just too small today, and it needs to get a lot bigger for it to really move the needle.
That's such a bummer, by the way, because I'm very inspired by WisdomTree and John O and sort of his pioneering in ETFs, and like how at some point ETFs had to be evangelized in the way that tokenization had to be, and then it became like the thing. So it's kind of disappointing that we're not exactly surfing into like that easy. I guess it sounded like it wasn't even easy, but that we're actually making it harder by creating fragmentation and different standards across different technologies.
And maybe just to add one thing, one of the risks that we face today is, I would say, geographical fragmentation because of regulation. We see this from our perspective, from SG Forge, the stablecoin issuer. We've seen the EU kind of pushing back this multi-issuer, one stablecoin with different issuer kind of structure, where they would limit, because you need to get the license in the EU to do business in the EU, and you need to get a US license in the US to do the same business. These kinds of make worldwide transactions like one playground a bit difficult. And although this is kind of the best promise of this technology, I would say, to have one playground for every player around the world to play with, subject to appropriate regulation and licenses, obviously. We need to be very careful that we don't get too fragmented because of these new worlds that are being built by some regulations. And hopefully, lobbying and all the discussions that we'll have in the next few months will allow to keep this kind of flows coming from everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And on those flows, and just thinking of geographic fragmentation, thinking of liquidity really is the lifeblood of markets, right? And so this liquidity fragmentation, I guess, Christine, maybe with you and everyone, whoever wants to respond, how is that manifesting in tokenized markets today?
Well, I mean, I guess there's fragmentation, even before you even get to the liquidity part, which is, especially if you're talking about real world assets, you have to do proper KYC and AML and onboarding and whitelisting. So, that in itself makes the asset on permissionless blockchains a little bit less seamless than anything else, right? So you have the fragmentation of who's on the whitelist, not many people, and who's not on the whitelist, right? So there's that. And then, I think the opportunity, which is also a challenge, is especially, my focus is on private markets, is that private markets generally are not super liquid. That's why we're able to generate alpha. And you're essentially putting some of these assets in a super liquid environment. And so there's, kind of a disconnect there on, how or market infrastructure or markets that need to be created to essentially enable a more seamless transfer of these type of assets. And then on top of that, then you have what is the conventional fragmentation that you talk about across different blockchains, and different standards. So yeah, definitely a lot of challenges. But as I mentioned, definitely feeling at least now is the time where these challenges are worth fighting through. As I mentioned, the market overall is about $4 trillion of capital that sits outside of the conventional, system. And that is composed of hundreds of millions of investors that range from institutional to, ultra high net worth, mass affluent to retail. And certainly, this is an audience that could use high quality investment products aside from just crypto, which is great. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's worth the fight, but certainly a number of challenges ahead. Can't say that it's a silver bullet, turn it on, now we're awesome. Definitely have things to work through, but the promise is there.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else on liquidity fragmentation you want to add to that? I think that quite a number, we've talked about infrastructure gaps and standards, I guess. What are key ones that you think are needed for more scalable tokenization?
I mean, I think the biggest one is some sort of scalable, so you're not dealing with just one person's whitelist, right? Some sort of scalable model, whether a digital ID or some sort of attestation model, where people who are bringing people on chain are able to test, do whatever it is and say, and other people can consume that information. People have been talking about this for like a long time now. Like as long as I've been working on this, people have been talking about digital ID, and no one's actually kind of put forward like a real solution here. But maybe that's changing, and maybe that changes in light of kind of a more innovation-friendly regulatory environment in the U.S. But I think certainly for scale, you need to get to some sort of model of like not every single provider needs to like KYC all their own like that's just not, we're just not going to get there if that's the case.
Absolutely. I think digital identity is such a key missing piece right now. And thinking maybe just, Charles, to you, how do you see, I guess, the role of custodians, settlement networks evolving as we see more tokenized assets on chain?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I would say that's the first brick that we need for our clients and to develop this market and this business of tokenized assets. We at SocGen, we are an issuer of structured products, and one of the first things that we have when we issue in tokenized form is like, natively digital. There's nothing in DTCC or Euroclear. It's purely the token on chain. But then it's how do you custody it? So I know Andrew doesn't like the self-custody piece, but I would say that the best promise would be like you don't need a third-party intermediary. You can manage it. You can manage as an investor everything yourself. Well, that's maybe true for some investors, but for all the regulated counterparties out there that need a qualified custodian, that's a no-go. And having trusted regulated third parties that do provide these custody services is really an enabler for us, so that we can say to our clients, look, you just have to plug this add-on with your existing custodian, and it will be a seamless experience for you. You can receive the assets, it will be in your position report, it will feed your accounting, your tax, everything. Your withholding will be calculated properly. You don't have to worry about anything. And that's where I think we will see a real bump into this kind of business.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think from, we're a custodian at heart, and we're custodying $20 trillion worth of traditional assets. We certainly see that our role continues into digital assets. And that's why I said one of the reasons that we're concentrating so much on this over the last decade has been because we do see that we're going to see a lot of traditional assets move to a more digital nature. So that ability to custody is key, that for institutional clients to have somebody who's going to provide that safety and safekeeping around it and keep it protected for them as we do today. And that really is the regulated types of parties who are building funds, who are building investment strategies, who are really holding massive amounts of assets around all chains and all different asset types. Going back to what Will said, we're really talking about being asset agnostic, blockchain agnostic. I mean, that's the whole point of what we're talking about, right? Is we should have capabilities to provide for our clients like we do today. And I think from a regulatory standpoint, the important part of not having fragmentation is, the whole idea of same product, same asset, same rules, same principles. A bond is a bond is a bond. It doesn't matter whether it's on a blockchain or whether it's on somebody's private network, because at the end of the day, if you start creating rules around what technology to use, then you're letting regulators pick your technology solutions. And historically, as a financial industry, we've always had capabilities to improve and innovate with whatever technology we want, as long as the product produces and is protected in the manner that's being defined.
I think that's a really critical point, because while we could be agnostic across, change, we can't be agnostic across jurisdictions from a regulatory perspective. Yeah. So I guess what's really needed then to harmonize, in everyone's view, kind of tokenized asset treatment globally?
Same products, same principles. For me, and I think it is important that, we have clarity coming here through clarity. We have MiCA in Europe, and we have BIS trying to make some standards around all of this. I think that the key is that we all, whether we're DeFi, whether we're TradFi, we all take the opportunity to comment and talk to the regulators and legislators as we're setting forth these frameworks, to make sure that we all are really pushing what is best for the industry and what's best for investors in the industry. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have that protection of the clients, then that's where you start to have leakages away from the volatility and liquidity.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think that regulatory collaboration is critical across industry collaboration. When it comes to use cases, I guess, where is tokenization delivering real value today from everyone's perspective? And I guess what asset classes would you say are gaining the most traction?
Well, I think it starts with stablecoins, right? Like that's actually the first tokenized world asset. It's like on-chain money, so maybe broader than just what you consider stablecoins. But then growing from there, I mean, our largest product's a tokenized money market fund. Those very clearly have product market fit today. It's very competitive and also lots of flows going into those types of products, which is just kind of adding yield on top of a stable value instrument. And I think you're going to see kind of continued growth up there, especially on like the yield demand side. It certainly seems like there's a lot of interest in yield generating strategies, like what Apollo's done, like what WisdomTree's done with some other strategies, where that's what the DeFi community is demanding today. I mean, it's been interesting seeing what types of things have kind of taken off, kind of moving up the risk spectrum there. But those are the types of things that we're focused on.
Additionally, I think that for, especially the private markets asset classes, in the near term can see benefits like, I explained the DeFi experimentation that we've been doing with Morpho. Like that is essentially like on-demand NAV financing at any size with marketplace competitive pricing and completely seamless experience. Like needs like some wrapping around that, but very powerful compared to what is on offer today. And then I mentioned how just because you tokenize something doesn't mean it's instantly liquid. But certainly, like the tokenization format and the open architecture does, allow for the potential for more secondary liquidity for private funds, as an example. So that's like the second level of, how blockchain can impact an asset class. And then at the next level, which, WisdomTree and Apollo, we co-wrote a paper on this. The killer use case, I think, for blockchain is the fact that it's essentially enabling us to bring in various different asset classes together on the same operating system and make it programmable. And the actual output of that is being able to deliver totally customized model portfolios, multi-asset portfolios that include dollars, treasuries, money markets, private credit, crypto, equities, all together in a portfolio that's designed just for your risk profile, just for your savings and retirement goals. And I think that's super powerful in that, essentially everyone in this room, everyone not in this room can actually be earning and saving and retiring better without really having to do much more because of the automation possibilities of blockchain and smart contracts. So I think at least for us at Apollo, that is a significant North Star of what we think really could be like the ultimate prize using blockchain and tokenization.
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on that, because we also were on the paper, is that I think about tokenization doing it's either new distribution or like new UX, right? And that's like a great example of like new UX. Like, what's a new user experience that just can't be enabled with the traditional kind of system as we think about it? And that kind of customization at scale, kind of scalable model portfolios across, like, then you also hear like the standards coming in through there too, right? If you have like a standardized way that you can interact with different asset classes, there's just a lot of power in that, just like we saw with ETFs, but this expands it kind of even more. So I completely agree with Christine.
Maybe the ETF is not actually the tokenized assets themselves, but actually just the model portfolios that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, we have 1 minute and 20 seconds left. So some rapid hot takes for each of you. When it comes to tokenization, what do we need to, as an industry, stop doing, start doing, and what's one word you'd use to describe the current state of tokenization right now? Maybe Andy, starting with you.
I think stop doing is ignoring what we've done in the past, right? I mean, we have to include regulators, like I said. We have to think about, getting everything converging rather than trying to build the perfect private network. I think what we need to start doing is thinking about how institutions are going to have to support two different environments all at once, because we've done it in the past with everything that we've had to deal with. I could go on about that forever, but I'll stop. And in one word, kind of where we are is adolescent, right? We've moved on from the exciting birth of it to now, it's becoming kind of real, and we'll move into the scale and the adulthood in the next few years.
Great takes, Charles. How about you?
Very shortly, I would say stop thinking about this just as a technical feature and see the business opportunities beyond just the technical part. Start getting custodians accepting tokenized assets globally, so that linked to kind of digital ID, the assets can flow from qualified custodians to qualified custodians. And in one word, I would say uncharted. I'm pretty sure we haven't begun to see just the beginning of what the opportunities will be by using smart contracts in investment solutions.
Stop doing, I'd say, press release theater, which has definitely slowed down a bit, but you still see some of. Start doing, I would say, like actually listening and talking to your clients more and like what they're trying to achieve. And one word, you could just say inevitable, but I prefer to say something more like green shoots, right? Like we're seeing, it's 2 words, but I think the
What was
concept.
the second word?
Green shoots.
It's like
just
2
because
words.
It is two. It's. I hyphenated it. Yeah, green shoots. We've seen product market fit. That's great. We didn't actually prove that out 5-6 years ago. We've got that now, and we should keep going.
I would say, and I've said this before, like just stop making up words that like confuse regular people and make it sound super scary and abstract, that they feel like they need to understand like, the tech end to end to like use it. I mean, like the new thing that have been going on is like everybody uses Amazon, nobody knows how AWS works. Totally fine, y'all can get value from it. Like that's kind of how I want people to think about the blockchain. I mean, obviously we need to know how it works, but like, in terms of like, business stakeholders and users, just figure out what is a commercial use case that works. You don't need to get into like the consensus mechanism or the decentralization level. And then I would say just start or continue accelerating into commercial use cases. This is the only reason why it's gonna work. Like it's not gonna work if it's based on technology nerdery, which, got us as far as we have. But in reality, people want to see commercial use cases. They want to figure out how can they be better, faster, smarter, and everything that they're doing, start with that, not the technology. And then in terms of how to describe tokenization today, as always, as it has been in the past decade, exciting. Very exciting, hyphenated.
Those are some fantastic hot takes. Thank you to our panelists for really great insights, and to Ty for having us. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thanks.